evolution, who do you think of? The name Charles Darwin should come to mind. And Charles Darwin was made particularly famous, if you will, by his theory of natural selection after he wrote The Origin of Species. And Darwin was a naturalist who took a voyage from England, and the voyage lasted 5 years. And it was on the HMS Beagle to the Galapagos Islands. So he took this trip all the way around and ended up at the Galapagos. And before this, had studied to be a doctor. He had also studied, to be a priest. But that just wasn't what he wanted to do. So he took this voyage, and he ended up going to the Galapagos and seeing all of these different species. After this long journey where he was seasick and he was doing a lot of reading about the Earth and Aristotle and creationism, and he also read about how explained how species compete with each other. And he also read about Lamarck's theories, saying that species acquire the characteristics. Well, he gets to the Galapagos and sees all these different species, and we're talking about land all over the place, and these different islands, they look different, like what you see here, and different terrains have different vegetation and different food for these animals. So just looking at some of the animals he looked at the iguanas, the tortoises, the finches, we see these blue-footed boobies, and he wanted to know what was it that caused these species to look this way and to be this way. And the one that we discuss mainly are the finches, and these are the finches that are found at the different islands, and they're all finches, but if you notice, all of their beak characteristics are different. And he wanted to know why. So he collected all of this evidence and all this data and started coming up with some theories on his return home. And he became known as the father of evolution because he started coming up with, well, there's a reason that these finches are so similar, but they're different. And then he came up with this theory of natural selection, saying that a species will become what it is and be able to survive because it's the most fit for being able to survive in that environment. So, this happened in the finches, this happened in the tortoises. You have the different shells on the tortoises, the different beaks on the finches. And then he met a lot of controversy because I mentioned Lamarck's theory before. And remember that Lamarck had said that organisms acquire the characteristics that they need to survive. So the giraffe started out with a short neck, but it couldn't reach the leaves in the trees because they were too tall. So it stretched its neck and became this animal with this long neck in order to survive so it can reach the leaves on the trees so it could survive. That was Lamarck's idea, and that was accepted, that creatures acquire the characteristics that they needed. And then you have the church, and evolution was a topic that really was not discussed. It was all about creationism and the story of Adam and Eve and how we learn the biblical stories. So when Darwin was explaining, no, there's this other way that this is possibly happening and came up with this theory of natural selection, he met a lot of controversy. And he wrote his book, The Origin of Species, and on the last page, he mentioned evolution once. And it met, a lot of adversity, but this became a more widely accepted theory, and this is what we talk about now. People wanted to just think that there was creationism and or organisms just acquired what they needed, but he really came up and started to describe evolution as being that gradual change in a population over a period of time. So it was a slow process, and that's where Darwin really made his mark, and we started really studying how the environment and the populations are going to interact to come up with this theory. And it was interesting because Darwin, grew up in the 1800s, in this time, and thinking, he was still of the old school where he believed that a woman's job was to to stay home, take care of the children. It was, important to have children in order to keep the species going. And he lived out his days writing about, um, his findings and reading and just really supporting his document, The Origin of Species.